thank you all for being here today. It's a very exciting day for NORML. My name is Emily Bayless, and I'm a field organizer with NORML. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, the executive and chair of Minnesota NORML, and a board member of the National NORML, Randy Quas. Please give a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome everybody. I would like to just talk a few words about Minnesota NORML. Minnesota NORML started, I am a successful retired businessman. I employed about 500 people. I owned a trucking company and was always a law-abiding person, but I also happen to be a chronic daily marijuana user. I use it for very medical reasons, and I attribute the success of my company. I don't think I could have gained that success without the help of marijuana. So anyway, Minnesota. Minnesota NORML, one of our sayings that we always say is the first people that ought to have marijuana are those with a medical need, but the best way to make that happen is to make it legal for everybody. I mean, you got to keep in mind, we're talking about a substance that I like to quote Richard Lee. He was the founder of Oaksterdam down in California, but his mother's on the speaker circuit, and she always says, you have to realize we're talking about a substance less dangerous than beer, less risky than children's cough syrup, and about as addictive as caffeine. And so it's, you know, it's a non-toxic herb. I got involved with this when I had too much, and I had a drug task force come SWAT style to my house. They could have called me and I would have driven over to the department, but they had to come SWAT style. And so anyway, but because I had the means to hire an attorney and deal with the charges, I was charged with a felony possession for 3 ounces of a non-toxic herb. But again, because I could afford the means, I hired an attorney, I got the best of outcomes, I got a stay of adjudication, no like offenses, and we'll drop all the charges. And that was in 2010, and I came back to Minnesota, and I went to a NORML convention in Portland, and I came back to Minnesota and said, I want to get a Minnesota NORML going in here. So we started, we're just 3 years old. We started with 5 board members. We now have a list of, we're approaching 5,000 members over the past 3 years, and it's growing more and more. So anyway, yeah, I just welcome everybody here. If you have any questions for me after, I'd love to talk to you. We have a great lineup of speakers here, and so I'm going to leave time for them to move on. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Tom Gallagher. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Minneapolis. I'm a board member of Minnesota NORML. And I'm here to speak for just a couple minutes about, really to focus on the legislative action side of Minnesota NORML, which is what we're trying to expand as quickly and as much as we possibly can right now, including today. That's why we're here today at the Capitol. We want to influence the legislative process in Minnesota because our ultimate goal is to legalize marijuana for responsible adult use. Anybody 21 and up should be able to go buy marijuana, the same as beer or wine. That's what we want. That's what we want, and we fully expect to achieve this within, a relatively small number of years from now. But we need to get going on this. We need to work, dig in, and push hard right now, and that's why we're here today. And so that's our goal. That has always been our goal. We are gaining, our momentum is increasing exponentially. Year by year, month by month, we're getting stronger and bigger and more powerful, and we are going to get this done. I myself have decided to run for political office to the Minnesota House of Representatives. I'm not going to talk about my campaign today, but I wanted to just mention that to encourage any one of you who have been thinking about running for political office to go ahead and make that leap of faith and do it, because it's hard. It's a hard decision to make and it's a lot of work, but it can really help our cause if you do. If you are not up for that challenge, please help out candidates who are running for political office in Minnesota who are committed to legalizing marijuana in Minnesota. And I'm not the only one. And it shouldn't matter if you're an incumbent, if you're a challenger, if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian Party member, Independence Party member, Grassroots Party member, or other third party member. Free party. Yes, all of our political parties, or an independent. It shouldn't really matter. We just want candidates who will support legalization of marijuana. Today, we are going to do a training after this event over at the Kelly Inn, which is about a block that way. We're going to do a training on legislative action or citizen lobbying to help teach everybody how to go about, or how better to go about, contacting your legislators to communicate with them and have a dialogue about what issues you care about. And you don't really have to have training for that. I mean, you can go ahead and do it without training. And I think every legislator, every candidate desperately wants to have a dialogue with you and to connect with you as a voter and as a person in Minnesota about your issues. So don't be shy about it, because they want you to talk to them. They want to talk to you. They're busy sometimes. You need to work out a schedule or an appointment or something, ideally, but they do want to talk to you. So you can set up an appointment with their office to meet with them. You can try to go to some of their town meetings in your district, or other events where you can meet them and speak up with them, or even get involved with their campaign if they support our issue or your issues. So come to our training after this, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so next on the list here we have TJ Nelson. He is the Brainerd area Minnesota NORML leader, and he is going to talk to us a little bit about Brainerd. Let's give him a round of applause, guys.
My name is TJ Nelson. I'm from the Brainerd area in Minnesota, and I came to you today to talk to you about truth. I want to bring up a subject that's very important to me as a Minnesotan born and raised, and that's Genesis 1, chapters 26 to 31. And they say that God created all seed-bearing fruits for man to consume. That's Genesis 1. That's what I believe. Truth, I want to bring up truth because we're living in this time and dealing with this fight because of a travesty. And the word travesty is, the definition is a gross misrepresentation of a subject or matter. And the fight on cannabis is a travesty. The prohibition of cannabis, interestingly enough, more than half of the war on drugs is fought against the drug against war. It's very interesting when we start to look at the facts. In this fight, we are charged with facts. To stand here and say we need to change a law means we have to stand behind facts. And the fact is that cannabis is medicine. That's a fact, and you can ask people with PTSD if cannabis is a medicine. And you can ask people with Crohn's disease if cannabis is a medicine. And you can ask people with AIDS, HIV, Alzheimer's, cancer, lymphoma, epilepsy. You can ask their parents. You can ask their grandparents. There's a medical marijuana bill that's being looked at in the Senate currently. I support all measures of cannabis law reform. But the fact is that it's not enough. Cannabis is medicine for all. That's the medicine that God gave us. We can all grow it. My idea of a medicine is not bottled up in a pill, overexpensive, only available to people with good health insurance and in a good community that supports medicine. That's not all of America. North Minneapolis is a place where a lot of people do not have medical coverage. They're not going to be privy, they're not going to have the privilege to go get a medical marijuana card. Cannabis is medicine for everybody and for a lot of ailments. And we need to support the end to prohibition. Prohibition kills, cannabis cures.
Thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is Daryl Paulson. He is a citizen lobbyist. Let's give it up.
I wear many, many hats as I sit here before you at the Capitol today. I wear the hat of a proud father of a 2-year-old daughter. I wear the hat of a citizen lobbyist for over 24 years. I've been fighting this issue beside you, with you, and for you for 24 years. I wear another hat. I wear a hat of the marijuana activist. I wear a hat of a friend to Minnesota NORML. I wear a hat as a political lobbyist, as a political candidate, and most of all, I wear the hat proudly because I sit here and speak to you today as somebody who benefits from using marijuana on a daily basis. I was worried about what I was going to say today because I work for a number of groups and organizations that don't support your cause and don't support legalization. So I was worried about that. But as I sit here today and I'm amongst friends, many of you I know and many of you I want to know. So if you got good pot, meet me up after, we'll talk about it. My name is Daryl Paulson. Many, many years ago, I learned that cannabis helps me. It reduces my muscle spasticity, it relieves my pain, and most of all, it gives me a quality of life that other medications do not give me. As I said before, I speak to you at this Capitol because in 1991, I first did my first public speaking in front of Senator Linda Bruglin's committee, and I told them why I used medical cannabis and what it did for me. Well, it's now 24 accept that. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit to Governor Dean. He's been an interesting character. Many times I've talked to Governor Dean on a lot of different issues. Most recently, he signed the Safe and Supportive Schools Act, which ends anti-bullying in schools. Most people with disabilities get bullied 2 to 3 times more than the average student. He signed that bill last week. I'm very proud of him for that. On the marijuana issue, he's been rather kind of sticky about it. He said he supports us. He's even invited us in to his house to talk to us about it. During those talks, he says he's made mention to several folks, well, if it's just a small ticketable offense, you can get it on the street. What I say to that is crap. I'd rather say the word shit or bullshit, but I know the cameras have to edit me, so they'll just have to do that. So what the governor has said, that people can just go out and do this on the street, and so what that does is that makes it very unsafe for me and my family. That makes me a criminal most of the time. I'm very proud of being a criminal. I've been busted for marijuana. However, my health is getting a little bit worse. I'm getting a little bit slower, and I'm getting a little nicer. I asked him, why do you really want to turn me into a criminal? Or why should I stay a criminal? And he says, well, it's worked for you this long, so it's okay. Well, I say to him, it's not okay. And as we go on, we talk about some other things, like the legislature. Many times, the legislature says that they have your back, they support you, they care about you, and yes, they support legalizing marijuana. Well, I say to that, they're lying to you. Most of the time, the legislature and legislators lie. Why? To get your vote. So it's important when people say that it's not important to vote, it's not important to call upon your elected officials to tell them how you feel on this issue. I say that's absolutely wrong. You need to vote. You need to be out there. You need to be proud of what you stand for. If I can do this, and I do this for a living, so most of you guys can do it maybe 1 hour a week, maybe 2 hours a month. But if I do this for a living on a daily basis, and I'm in a wheelchair, I have a beautiful 2-year-old daughter, and a wife who's also in a wheelchair, you guys have no excuse but to be up here every week, every month, every week, year to do this. I don't want to see you on a day like today, where it's lobby day and everybody is excited, everybody's happy. Guess what? I want to see you tomorrow. Tomorrow there's a hearing, and maybe Friday there's a hearing. But guess what? I know this because I'm here every day. Not everybody knows that. Okay? So I urge you guys to do a couple things. When you guys go out and support organizations like Minnesota NORML, and you're not a registered voter, tell them you want and in the back doors where most of the action happens. But I learned that if I dressed like they did, I talked like they did, I understood what their concerns were, then they were going to listen to what my issue was. And my issue is to have a quality of life for everybody, and for everybody to have the option to self-medicate themselves in whatever way they choose, and whether that's using marijuana recreational or whether it's using it in conjunction with another medication, then you have the right to do it. So I welcome you, and I thank you for being here at the Capitol today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Just a quick reminder here, Minnesota NORML does not condone any illegal behavior. Also, let me see those signs. I know all of you guys have them. There we go. Very good. Nice. All right, so our next speaker is Miss Nicole Miller. She is a humanitarian change agent. Let's give her a big round of applause, guys.
Greetings, I come to you in peace. I want to start by just telling you a little bit about myself. My lineage, my ancestry is very diverse. It's Norwegian, it's Swedish, it's German, it's Czechoslovakian, it's Creek, it's Choctaw, it's African. It's many different ethnic groups, very many different tribes coming together in this one body. And I recently had somebody on Facebook question me very respectfully and just say, as somebody that I would identify as biracial, I'm trying to understand why you identify as Black American. And what I had to explain to this young person is, while I acknowledge that my ancestry comes from Europe, comes from Africa, comes from the native land here, that it is the oppressed parts of me that I have to set free. Because if any part of me is oppressed, I am oppressed. So while I acknowledge all of the different faces in here and all of the different experiences in here, I also understand that we live in a society that operates with a white supremacy power structure. And what that means is the white, cisgendered, educated, middle-class male is the standard by which all of us are measured and compared. And anything not that is seen as abnormal, as seen as deficient. And we all know the polar opposite of that is the Black, male, uneducated, low class in America. So these laws have very specifically, and we know from the statistics, targeted Black males and brown males disproportionately being criminalized. In the work that I do, one of the big things I talk about is the day after. We get very focused on our goal and attaining our goal. Right now, that is the legalization of marijuana, and we all are here to fight for that goal. As a humanitarian change agent, my job is to push beyond that, to move into those places that are uncomfortable for us. So what I want to put out into our minds today is, what about the day after? We have a powerful opportunity with the legalization of cannabis to create equity within our communities, within our cities, within our society. The fear that I hold in the legalization of marijuana is that just as it being illegal has put the Black community at a deficit, that it being legalized will do the same thing. That now that all of these young men have been criminalized, have been branded, when the time comes to be a provider, to open a dispensary, that they will be excluded from that pot because they will not be able to get licenses. They will not be able to work at dispensaries. And once again, inequity will come into our community and we will have another fight to fight. So I stand here today asking us as we move forward to be very conscious and to be very intentional about the day after and what this looks like and how this will impact our community. I came to you in peace and I will leave you in peace. Thank you.
All right, so now we have Nicole Sims, and she is a fellow at Minnesota 2020. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicole Sims and I am a fellow at Minnesota 2020. Minnesota 2020 is a nonpartisan think tank focused on a variety of policy issues in Minnesota. And I'm here today to talk to you about a report that we just released and which I authored that documents the racial disparity in marijuana possession arrests in Minnesota and the consequences of an arrest for individuals. The report, which is called Collateral Costs, Racial Disparities and Injustice in Minnesota's Marijuana Laws, was inspired by a report released by the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, last year. That report documented a significant racial disparity in marijuana possession arrests across the U.S., with blacks being far more likely than whites to be arrested for possession. Minnesota was shown to be a particularly high offender in this regard, with the third largest racial disparity in the nation. So Minnesota 2020 partnered with Minnesota NORML to delve further into our state's racial disparity in marijuana possession arrests. We wanted to determine what this disparity is, how it plays out across the state, and what factors might be contributing to it. And most importantly, we wanted to look at how it impacts individuals in both the short and long term. Many studies that look at the costs associated with marijuana prohibition focus on enforcement costs. But we wanted to focus on how the enforcement of marijuana laws financially impacts individuals and communities. So I'd like to briefly share some of the findings from our study with you today. First, we took a look at the statewide disparity in possession arrests. And according to the most recent FBI data, blacks in Minnesota are over 6.4 times more likely than whites to be arrested for marijuana possession. This rate is over 2 times the national average. And it persists, this disparity, despite similar reported use rates among blacks and whites. So blacks make up about 5.5% of Minnesota's population, but over 27% of marijuana possession arrests. And this tells us that the many direct and indirect costs that are associated with a marijuana possession arrest are far more likely to be incurred by black Minnesotans. Since many black Minnesotans already face disparities with respect to employment, income, education, housing, and health, these costs are often amplified. So second, we considered how this disparity plays out across the state. And we only looked at counties with a population of over 30,000 people and a black population of over 2% to make sure that the results were statistically significant. So a racial disparity was found in every county that met these criteria, and many exceeded the national average of 3.05. And Ramsey County exhibited the highest disparity. So blacks in Ramsey County are 8.8 times more likely than whites to be arrested for marijuana possession. Hennepin and Steele counties follow, both at 6.4. Racial disparities persist across counties everywhere on the economic spectrum in terms of per capita income, percent in poverty, and percent unemployed. Third, we considered possible explanations for this racial disparity in possession arrests in Minnesota. There are several different factors that may be at play here. A 2006 nationwide study indicates there may be some cultural differences in marijuana purchasing behavior that put blacks at greater risk of arrest. The study found, for example, that blacks are more likely to buy marijuana outdoors and to buy it from a stranger, but not by factors large enough to explain the disparity that we're seeing. These disparities are arguably attributable, at least to some degree, to police practices. Aggressive stop and search practices are often deployed in hotspots. These are areas with higher crime rates, and police resources are often concentrated in these places in an attempt to preempt future crime. During a search, the item that police are most likely to find that will lead to an arrest is marijuana. Because these neighborhoods neighborhoods are more likely to be populated by low-income and minority residents, they're more likely to be caught in possession of marijuana than people that live in other areas. Minnesota has a long history of hotspot policing. In fact, the very first hotspot experiments were conducted in Minneapolis in the late 80s. The Council on Crime and Justice has also documented significant racial bias in traffic stops in Minnesota. Their study found that although contraband was actually found more often in cars with white drivers, a greater amount was found in cars with minority drivers because they were stopped at a much greater frequency. Federal funding for drug task forces likely incentivizes numerous low-level drug arrests, since funding is often based on the quantity rather than the quality of arrests. For this reason, the California Drug Policy Alliance recently recommended that more federal funds be allocated to substance use treatment and that funding for marijuana suppression activities be eliminated entirely in the interest of eradicating racially disproportionate low-level drug arrests. The nature of the racial disparity in arrests for marijuana possession, the remainder of the report is devoted to exploring the costs associated with an arrest. So the direct costs considered are those that immediately follow an arrest. Things like court and attorney fees, fines, mandatory treatment costs. These can run thousands of dollars depending on the case. The indirect or collateral costs stemming from an arrest for possession are harder to quantify, but they have the potential to produce significant economic opportunity loss for individuals. And I'll just touch on a few examples of the costs detailed in the report. Civil forfeiture involves the seizure of assets suspected to be related to a crime, even in the absence of conviction. Many of these forfeitures are related to narcotics. The average value of individual forfeitures in 2012 in Minnesota was about $1,200. Individuals often don't bother trying to recoup their property since the cost of doing so often exceeds the value of the assets seized. A marijuana possession arrest, conviction, and of course incarceration can impact income and job prospects in many ways. Individuals lose wages when they are detained immediately following an arrest and while they await trial if they're unable to secure a release. Those who are incarcerated lose wages throughout their sentence, and incarceration has also been found to impact long-term earnings by 10 to 30%. Employment prospects can also be limited because a criminal record makes people ineligible for some professional licenses and unable to travel to certain countries. In addition, employers are often reluctant to hire people with a criminal record. The potential loss of the social safety net can also produce financial hardship. For example, drug-related criminal activity can result in a 3 to 5 year suspension from public housing. A forced move from public to private housing means significantly higher rent over that 3 to 5 year period. Depending on the county and the size of the unit required, this increased rent can run anywhere from $1,400 to over $65,000. There are also collateral costs that are impossible to quantify, such as emotional distress, the potential loss of child custody, and the impact of having a number of individuals within a community arrested or incarcerated. These costs can significantly impact individuals, families, communities, the state, and even the nation, and these are explored toward the end of the report. Since no one person will experience all of the costs we explore, the report includes hypothetical profiles that demonstrate the costs individuals could conceivably incur as a result of a conviction for marijuana possession. These profiles indicate a potential financial loss of up to $76,000 over several years. None of the costs considered in the report are race-specific, but again, since blacks are so much more likely than whites to experience a marijuana possession arrest, they are so much more likely to experience these costs, which exacerbates existing inequities. For this reason, we believe marijuana laws and their enforcement should be considered within a civil rights framework. designed to shed light on the racial disparity in arrests and the impact of an arrest on individuals, but we are hopeful that it will spark a discussion between lawmakers, law enforcement, community organizations, and citizens about marijuana laws. We do offer some recommendations for moving forward. The first involves reforming laws that currently increase collateral costs, such as making a conviction required before assets can be seized in connection to criminal activity. The second involves reforming police practices so that there is more transparency in how arrests are made and better training to address racial bias in policing. We recommend that full legalization be considered. This would basically eliminate the costs associated with an arrest for marijuana possession. However, the broader issue of racial injustice will still require attention since racial disparities exist across the board in this state. We obviously can't make criminal activity legal wherever a racial disparity in arrest or conviction or incarceration exists, but in this case, we need to ask ourselves if the harm associated with enforcement outweighs the harm associated with the criminal activity. The argument that marijuana prohibition is a civil rights issue is not a new one. For example, the ACLU and some chapters of the NAACP have long made this argument. But we are hopeful that this report will give people a more tangible sense of the toll that the war on drugs has on individual lives, and especially the lives of people of color, because in as much as possible, there are actual dollar amounts connected to this very long list of costs that could potentially result from a possession arrest. We need to seriously think about whether these laws are worth the devastation that they are inflicting on individuals and communities. So the report is available on the Minnesota 2020 website. I encourage you to check it out, and I'll be available after the rally for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Very nice, thank you. How's everyone doing? Good, good. I'd love to see more signs up here, guys. Let's see your signs. That guy's been holding his sign the whole time. I'm really impressed. You're really strong. All right, let's get our next speaker up here. Her name is Patricia Shepard, and she is a community organizer for Idle No More. Big round of applause, please.
Ishko Koya Indigenous Cause, Anishinaabe Moment, Igwich Kakanave, Go Get a Suchigan, and Bimarzilin, and Mishkazilin. Igwich, thank you all for being here. My name is Sky Woman. I'm Ojibwe, Prairie Band Potawatomi. I'm also with Idle No More. I'd like to thank you all for being here. Actually, I'm very honored to be asked to be here because, number one, for those of you out there, please don't take offense, but I don't smoke marijuana, but I totally support it. I support it for many reasons, and I want to try to get through this quite quickly because I think it's important and it's imperative for all of us to understand what's going on in Minnesota and how the legalization of what we call in Ojibwe sagaswate, marijuana, that's the word for it. We do have a word for it in Ojibwe. Our language is an ancient language that's been here for thousands upon thousands of years. It was in the Guinness Book of World Records for being one of the most difficult languages to learn. So sagaswate is the word for marijuana in the Ojibwe language. I want to thank you for listening to that. But let's get on to the real issues here. You know, Idle No More is about treaty rights. It's about environmental rights. It's about saving the water, the land, the air. And, you know, I'm sure many of you have become aware of the struggle of what's going on in Canada. But, you know, we as Indigenous people have had this same struggle for about 500 years. But something very local is happening here in Minnesota, and I really want to take this opportunity to address it. And believe me, when I get to the point where I need to, you'll understand what's going on. I'm going to talk a little bit about polymet. Any of you aware of polymet mining up in northern Minnesota? Canadian Polymet, North Met, want to open an open pit copper nickel mine where waste rock heaps and tailings base dumps would be located in Minnesota's Lake Superior Basin. The open pit mine would be located on what is now public land in the lake, in the Superior National Forest containing high quality wetlands and uplands. The tailings basin would be sited on top of an old tailings basin built in the 1960s on top of 3 streams. Across the country, there is no example where a sulfide mine has been operated and closed without polluting surface and or groundwater with acid mine drainage, sulfuric and or toxic metals. There's a danger to human health of mercury and methylmercury, and then there's the risk of 20 years of mining in exchange for up to 500 years of toxic pollution. We don't have any mechanism known that can ensure that the pollution could be treated for hundreds of years. The state of Minnesota and Canadians polymet legislators and lobbyists always are crying to the state of Minnesota into the Iron Range and all of their communities there about jobs, 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 jobs. We need jobs, we need jobs. Well, that's because we've impoverished that community. And part of the impoverishment means, well then, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to sell out the safety of our water? I mean, this is the real question. Are we going to sell out the safety of our water, or are we going to legalize marijuana to promote jobs? Because that's the real issue here. We need jobs in Minnesota. And one of the things, one of the things about Minnesota, and I don't mean to be antagonizing the legislature, but they really inflate themselves with how intelligent they are and how progressive they are and how smart they are and all these great educational institutions where they've come from. But they can't figure out the benefit of making millions of dollars of profit in marijuana growth. For our environment, if we were growing marijuana up in the Iron Range that would create jobs. And at the same time, Minnesota would be benefiting because there's huge amounts of tax revenues that is generated out of it. Colorado and Washington State has proved that. There's a lot of jobs that marijuana growers can, create, such as dispensaries, harvesters. If we have dispensaries, we're also going to need bookkeepers, customer service. Let's see here. I mean, there's any number of jobs. We're going to need webmasters. We're going to need people to be able to move this, industry forward. And, Minnesota legislators need to really get into the, mindset that this is 2014, this is not the dark ages. They need to quit pretending as if they don't know the truth about the benefits of marijuana. It's been shown over and over and over and over. Intellectual legislators who take great pride in their education and their great pride in their progressive thinking, take great pride in passing the legislation to legalize marijuana. Create jobs. Marijuana industry creates jobs. The other factor which really drew me to this audience today was not only the invitation, but also I wanted to let you know that my grandson, who I adore, I love all my grandchildren, they have me wrapped around their little finger. I have 4 of them. But 4 weeks ago, my baby grandson, who's 5, and for those of you who are grandparents, you understand what babies mean. Our babies are 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. But I love him dearly. He's the sweetest, most beautiful child that I could have ever asked for a grandchild. And he was diagnosed with epilepsy. And the first thing I did was freak out like the rest of my family. We cried, we hurt, we pained, and then I got on the internet and I looked for homeopathic methods to dealing with this epilepsy, and guess what I found out? Marijuana. It's marijuana. There was a case where this poor little girl who was probably less than 5 was having 20 to 30 seizures a day. She had to move to Colorado because Minnesota hasn't legalized marijuana at the degree that it needs to. They took her down to Colorado and they started to treat her, and voila, she hasn't had any seizures. What does that tell you? So, you know, again, Minnesota likes to pride themselves on how progressive they are. Well then, get with it. I don't know more. Stop waiting for what? You know, they're stopping this state from making millions and millions of dollars of profit from this industry of growing marijuana and creating jobs, and in turn investing in social programs like what Colorado has done, investing in education. They've invested in chemical dependency treatment centers for highly addicted individuals to other hardcore drugs. That's what Colorado is doing for their people. They're investing in helping to recover the people of their state, and so is Washington. So why isn't Minnesota investing in their people? That's what I want to know. I want to ask the Minnesota state legislators today and in the future, legalize marijuana. Legalize it because it's a benefit to everyone in the state, to the well-being of sick children and human beings, and it's a benefit to all of us to kind of catch up with where we're at in 2014, 2015. With that, I'd like to say, miigwechki nawa, peace and dawa. Thank you for listening to me.
I have a speech, but I'd like to also introduce a little chant. If you could raise your signs, I'm going to pose the question, can we legalize it? Okay, good start. I'll ask that question and then the answer will be, yes, we cannabis. Can we legalize it? Can we legalize it? Can we legalize it in Minnesota? Thank you. My name is Marcus. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a writer, I'm a community organizer, I'm a social entrepreneur, and I'm from North Minneapolis. The North Side is here in the so-called People's House. I'm here today as an unashamed and unapologetic weed smoker and a voting member of Minnesota NORML. Become a member today, please. And don't call me a stoner because I smoke responsibly. I'm sober right now. Personally, I smoke cannabis for both medical and recreational purposes. For me, smoking the holy herb is a healthy way to manage my stress. Although I don't suffer from severe depression, when I have felt depressed, marijuana has treated me very well. Beyond the healthy therapeutic benefits, cannabis is a much safer alternative to alcohol and tobacco. I think there's stats back there. Over 400,000 people die annually of tobacco, over 80,000 of alcohol-related deaths, and none for smoking marijuana. So, and I also need to point out that it's a ridiculous lie that they often say in the media that marijuana is a gateway drug. There's never been a moment, not one single moment in my life when I've considered experimenting with any really dangerous, highly addictive, illegal drug. Hell, I don't even want to use the legal, highly addictive, dangerous drug. I hope this ain't on TV. I hope my wife doesn't see it. But I don't think I'm alone. Does anyone here believe that cannabis is safer than alcohol and tobacco? Does anyone believe cannabis is a gateway drug? Can we legalize it? Yes, indeed. I'd have to say that I am not a criminal, but I've been treated like one for much of my life. At nearly 36 years old, even without a criminal record, I've been pulled over by police 61 times. This is what racial profiling looks like. As an African American man, I've been targeted excessively as a supposed threat to society and its failed war on drugs. African Americans represent approximately 13% of the U.S. population, but approximately half of the U.S. prison population. That is unacceptable. We were enslaved for 250 years in this country and racially oppressed by Jim Crow segregation for another century after that. And after chattel slavery was supposedly abolished, the 13th Amendment maintained a clause allowing for continued slavery, continued enslavement for prisoners. The so-called war on drugs, which began in the early 80s, began the new Jim Crow of mass incarceration, which has resulted in this country having only 5% of the world's human population, but 25% of its prisoners. And a large percentage of the prison population are for nonviolent drug offenses. And here in Minnesota, the majority of drug arrests are for marijuana possession. While studies have proven that there are equal usage rates between the so-called races, and I say so-called because there's only one, as the earlier speaker mentioned, African Americans are arrested 9 times more than European Americans here in Ramsey County and 7 times more in Hennepin County where I live. The war on drugs in the prison industrial complex have disproportionately devastated poor people, black people, Latinos, and Native Americans. It's time for it to end. Indisputably, full legalization of cannabis is a racial justice issue, not to mention a civil liberty issue. How about a little liberty and justice for all? So my time here is very limited, but I just have a few more succinct points to make. Our keynote speaker, Neil Franklin, will elaborate on this point. But ending prohibition is a law enforcement, listen clearly, integrity, effectiveness, and accountability issue. They should be responding to real crimes. As T.J. Nelson, my friend from Brainerd, stated, ending prohibition is a health justice issue. There are more than 200 medically therapeutic benefits. Let the people smoke. Finally, as our previous speaker mentioned, it's an economic development issue. This is really a no-brainer. So I need Governor Dayton and our legislature to pay attention. Imagine if we could save that $150 million we spend annually on prosecuting, arresting, and locking people up for having weed. Imagine if we legalized, regulated, and taxed cannabis, that we could raise as much money in tax revenue. Imagine if we legalized it, that we could create at least as many jobs as the number of people who are arrested annually in Minnesota, more than 10,000 people. So I say this with a heavy heart. Our federal government has lied to us. Special interest proponents of continued prohibition are lying to us. But a growing majority of Americans today are awake. They are in favor of full legalization. There are 20 states, plus the District of Columbia, that have legalized marijuana. And as you all know, this year Colorado and Washington State, the great states, have fully legalized marijuana, or cannabis, or weed, whatever you like to call it. So Minnesota, it's our time. It's our turn. And I have this quote. There's a few legislators here, including one of my favorite who's coming up. It's from Martin Luther King. This is Martin Luther King Boulevard out here. They have a statue right on the side here. He asked this, he said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it popular? Well, it's clearly popular. But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position, Governor Dayton, that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. Can we legalize it? Can we legalize it, Minnesota? Can we legalize it, Minnesota? Thank you very much. Peace and blessings.
All right, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I would like to introduce now one of our first of our 3 keynote speakers today, Representative Rena Moran. She is the Minnesota State House 65A representative, and she is the first African American woman elected to the Minnesota State House. Let's welcome her, guys.
Well, guys, how do I come after Marcus Hargis, right? Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to your house. This is the People House where the people voices are heard. So thank you for recognizing the value that your voice has on the issue that you care about. This is so important to me and the work that I do here at the Capitol. So again, my name is Rena Moran, and I represent District 65A, which is the Rondo, Frogtown, Midway, a little small portion of the North End and Cathedral Hill. In my other life, I was and am an organizer fighting for racial, social, and economic justice. And that has transitioned over to a legislator who is fighting for social, racial, and economic justice. So today, I come before you to support your efforts because of the impact that prohibition of marijuana has on a district that I represent. Recognizing that prohibition has failed, marijuana use is mainstream and widespread, much like alcohol was when it was prohibited. According to a 2013 ACLU report, blacks are 3.73 times likelier to be arrested for marijuana possession than whites. Minnesota arrests blacks 7.81 times more often for possession. And in Ramsey County, the county that I represent, we are 8.8 times more likely to be arrested, blacks, for marijuana possession. And we are 3rd in the nation. Yes, I said 3rd in the nation. Now, you may say, why are blacks arrested at higher rates than whites? They must be performing more illegal acts than whites. And I would say that is not the reason. What research tells us is that we have a long history of hotspot policing in Minnesota. So what that means is, in hotspot policing, law enforcement, they expand their presence in areas that they believe are more likely to experience crime. Hotspots are often in those areas represented by low income and people of color, hence blacks, meaning residents are stopped and searched more frequently than whites in other areas, which is why we have such high statistics of blacks being arrested in higher numbers. I was really appalled to find out that Ramsey County, where blacks are 8.8 times more likely than whites to be arrested for marijuana, with such high disparities. That is appalling. So what this means is that the costs and consequences of marijuana possession are being disproportionately shouldered on the backs of blacks in Minnesota, when close to 80% of Americans admit to using marijuana at least once in their lifetime. That's what they say, right? These arrests cause family members to be removed from public housing, the loss of incomes and jobs, loss of access to federal student loans, barriers to public assistance, driver license suspension, and when in communities of color, when we are intentionally targeted, this really impacts families, it impacts children, it impacts communities, and their likelihood to survive and thrive because of all the other policies and laws that I just mentioned keeps people from re-entering society as productive citizens. Laws, right? So laws and policies that seem to target low-income communities of color, the black community, to punish behavior that is so widespread and considered harmless by many and beneficial to others are clearly in need to be revised. Yes, needs to be changed. As a legislator who was first elected in 2010, who represents a community that is 30% African American, 33% Hmong, 33% white, and also filled with Somali, natives, Latino. This to me is really about how do we support all of us? How do we create justice for all of us? And how do we eliminate and remove laws and policies and systems that keeps us as a community embedded in a system that does not support us wholly? So I say, let's legalize marijuana. Let's create a system right here at this Capitol where we can tax, where we can regulate the sales and increase the revenue of the state of Minnesota so that we can invest more wisely in all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right, so we are going to move on to our next speaker. He works with me at Minnesota NORML. He is our Director of Organizing, and this is Nathan Ness for you guys.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to acknowledge the board of Minnesota NORML. We've got an outstanding board. I want to acknowledge Emily. She's wonderful. We've got Iris Eyestone, who's in the back there. She's been handing out free shirts, so if you want to thank somebody for a shirt. And I've had a lot of really nice bosses, people that I look up to, but I just want to highlight Randy Quast, who's the executive director of Minnesota NORML. He's a big part of the reason why we can do this today. Every time I acknowledge him, he's so humble, he doesn't want to hear it. It's like, shut up, Nate. So. We also had a debate with the board about whether or not to do chants here. And one of the chants that we came up with is one that I'd like us to do if you want to. How about a raise of hand? Do you want to do a chant? All right. That's a filibuster-proof majority as far as I could see. What do we want? Legal weed. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Legal weed. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Legal weed. When do we want it? Now. Thank you. Yeah. That's it. I used to be a Democrat, and still I usually vote Democratic Party, but Minnesota NORML, we've got people in every party, Green Party, Republican, everything, Democrats. Part of the reason that I don't really like being a Democrat anymore is because of Governor Dayton when it comes to sulfide mining, polymet, copper nickel mining. We're willing to pollute the waters and the boundary waters for 10 years of jobs for about 300 workers. Couldn't we get more jobs through legalizing marijuana? Would we rather have legal cannabis or polluted water? And we can actually do better financially as a state if we legalize cannabis. So let's stop polluting our natural resources and start doing what is obvious to everybody in this room. I really enjoy polls. There's a Gallup poll that came out that said that nationally, 58% of the country supports legalization. So why can't we have legalization?
Thank you.
It's because sometimes an elected official is not representing us, and that needs to change. As the director of organizing, I'm very excited and proud of the fact that we have now started 5 new chapters around the state in 2 months. We've started a chapter in Duluth, St. Cloud, Bemidji. Yeah, give a shout out. All right. Bemidji, Brainerd, and I think I'm forgetting at least one. Rochester. How could I forget? My dad is from Rochester. There's a great boxing gym there, by the way. I just want to say one thing too, just because we're all in a room together. I don't like the phrase recreational use. I prefer the phrase personal use. Yeah. And one thing that I share in common with the libertarians is let's get the government out of anything that is none of their damn business, right? Some of our people smoke it for spiritual reasons. Some of our people smoke it for personal, for recreation. Yeah, I mean, it's pleasurable, isn't it? It reduces stress, which is a preventative thing, health-wise. I'm offended by people who want to tell us that the whole discussion in Minnesota is medical only. This room is a testament to the fact that that's not true. When Representative Rena Moran spoke, she's absolutely right. I'm so grateful that she came here and spoke. It takes a lot of courage to do that as a legislator. She's the first one. We reached out to others. But I used to work in Connecticut, and one time I was driving across the border into Massachusetts, and I came back. I didn't know which state I was in for a minute, and that mattered quite a bit because I had about a dime of marijuana on me. Had I been pulled over in Connecticut, I would have gone to jail. I would have done time. Had I been in Massachusetts, I would have gotten away with it. But the fact that I'm a privileged white male meant that I didn't get anything. And I actually think that that's wrong. You know, we have a racist policing system.
Yeah.
What's that? Somebody should have said. How many people got one of these? They're in the back. We want to urge you after this to go over to the Kelly Inn. We want to urge you to schedule meetings with your legislator. We're going to do a little training on how to talk to your legislator, and we really encourage you to do this. We encourage you to set up a chapter in your own state. I was talking to a woman somewhere. She's from Austin, Minnesota, and I said, hey, when are you going to start a chapter? Everybody here can help Minnesota NORML legalize marijuana in Minnesota, and that's what we need to do. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Nathan. All right, so we are going to move on to our second keynote speaker. He is from the Anishinaabe tribe. He's a newspaper columnist, a poet, a performer, and political commentator from the Fond du Lac Indian Reservation. Let's give it up for Jim Northrup. Thank you.
Ujuni Jibi Marazig. Hello, my fellow human beings. Anim Nij Anishinaabe Dug. Hello, my fellow Indians. Bungi Etgoni Nitao Jibwem. Idash Ningaga Goejitun Ji Ojibwe Moyan. Jim Northrup Neen Indigenous Zaganashimun. My name in the English language is Jim Northrup. Chibanesi Indigo Ojibwe Mung. I'm called Chibanesi. Makwanin and Dudem. My clan is Bear. Nagachi Winangnin and Dunjaba. I'm from the Fond du Lac Reservation. By Iganing Inda. I live in the village of Sawyer. Kete, Anishinaabe, Ogichida, and Dao. I'm an old Ojibwe warrior. So it'll be completely different from what you've heard here today. I would like to recite some poetry. Poetry that helped me with my PTSD.
Right on.
And I think responsible use is great. I have to be responsible because the cops are always right there in my rear view mirror. I wrote this in 2002. It's in my newspaper column called the Fond du Lac Follies. Flags, flags, and more American flags. I see the red, white, and blue of the flags almost everywhere I go. The Fond du Lac Reservation gave black nylon jackets to the veterans from the res. On the left sleeve is an American flag. I've been proudly wearing that jacket for 4 years or more. The flag symbolizes my time in Vietnam. I remembered the flag-draped caskets coming home. As a young Marine, I was taught to salute the American flag to show respect. I remember how to do it, upper hand salute. The right arm is held at a 45-degree angle, fingers extended and joined, touching the hat rim. Lately, it's been getting out of hand. I was used to rendering a hand salute when I drove by Perkins or some other used car lots. Yeah. But now my arm is getting sore from all this saluting. Salute, salute, salute. I once counted 56 salutes as I drove through the downtown area of a small town in Minnesota. The flags were on every light pole. I don't drive that way anymore. I got some bananas at the store, and each one had a tiny American flag sticker on the side of the peel. The terrorists who attacked America are going to be very careful and afraid now that we have flags on our bananas. As for me, I'm going bananas saluting bananas. I would like to recite some poetry. This one is in memory of my brother. We called him Wabigan. Did you ever hear a sound, smell something, taste something that brought you back to Vietnam instantly? Did you ever wonder when it would end? It ended for my brother. He died in the war, but didn't fall down for 15 tortured years. His flashbacks are over. Another casualty whose name will never be on the wall. Some can only find peace in death. The sound of his family crying hurt. The smell of the flowers didn't comfort us. The taste in my mouth still sours me. How about a memorial for those who made it through the war, but still died before their time? I was an infantryman. I carried a rifle. People shot at me and I shot at them. As you can see, they missed. Anyway, in coping with the memories and the flashbacks, I found that THC is the only thing that helps PTSD. Okay. A friend of mine, Dennis, is here. He was in 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, and he wanted to hear this poem. This poem is about a visit we had by my great cultural American hero. Now I see some children up there, so I won't say the F word. I'll hum it. Hold up on that patrol, we got a chopper coming in. Good, no reason to stand, so we all sat down. The slapping sound of the rotor blades told us a landing was near. 2 gunships went over, suspicious, looking for danger to the chopper they were escorting. It landed, they walked in our direction. Starched jungle utilities, spit-shine boots, shiny rank insignia told us these were rear echelon Marines. They surrounded a large green-clad man. "It's John, Wayne," one grunt said. The Duke centered himself in a circle of men, posing, signing autographs. He was enjoying himself until the Indian patrol leader invited him for a walk with the grunts. Duke patted his ample belly and said, "I'll leave that to you professionals." John Wayne, who killed Indians by the dozens with his movie 6-shooter, refused. The ranking officers looked at the disrespectful Marines. Court-martials and other punishments filtered through the rear echelon brains. The grunts looked back with, "What you gonna do? Cut my hair and send me to Vietnam? I'm already here. Maybe for the rest of my life." The Duke looked troubled when he saw the killing etched in the eyes of the grunts. More killing than he'd seen in a quarter-century of movie killing. He gave some excuse about lung cancer and was excused from the rest of the war. Do I have time for 2 more? I would like to close by showing how I attempted to cope with it, PTSD. It's a poem called "Shrinking Away." Survived the war, but was having trouble surviving the peace. Couldn't sleep more than 2 hours, scared to be without a gun. Nightmares, daymares, guilt and remorse. Wanted to stay drunk all the time. 1966, and the VA said Vietnam wasn't a war. They couldn't help, but did give me a copy of the Yellow Pages. Picked a shrink off the list, $50 an hour. I was making $125 a week. We spent 6 sessions establishing rapport. I heard about his military life, his homosexuality, his fights with his mother, and anything else he wanted to talk about. At this rate, we would have got to me in 1999. Gave up on that shrink. Couldn't afford him. Wasn't doing me any good. 6 weeks later, my shrink killed himself. Great. Not only guilt about the war, but new guilt about my dead shrink. If only I had a better job, I could have kept on seeing him. I thought we were making real progress. Maybe in another 6 sessions I could have helped him. I realized then surviving the peace was up to me. This last one is called Grandma's Hair. It was really crazy at times. Once we got caught out in this big rice paddy, bad guys started shooting at us. I was close to the front of the formation, so I got inside the tree line quick. They couldn't see me anymore. When I leaned over to catch my breath, I heard the snick, bang sound of someone firing a bolt-action rifle, shooting at the Marines still out in the rice paddy. I could tell where he was from the sound of his rifle. Snick, bang. I fired a 3-round burst at the noise. That asshole turned and fired at me. I saw the muzzle flash, heard the bullet snap by at the same time. I fired another 3-round burst and I moved closer. Then, through a little opening in the brush, I could see what looked like a pile of rags, bloody rags. I went over and gave him one in the head to make sure. We used to do that all the time, one in the head to make sure. When my 7.62 bullet hit, it knocked his hat off. When his hat came off, all this hair comes spilling out. It was a woman. She had hair like my grandma's. Miigwech Bizendawieg, let's make it legal.
Neil Franklin, who is the Executive Director of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. You can cheer for him. Yay! So a little bit about is a 33-year-old police veteran who led multi-jurisdictional anti-narcotic task force for the Maryland State Police and ran training for the Baltimore Police Department. After seeing several of his law enforcement friends killed in the line of fire while enforcing drug policies, Neil knew that he needed to work to change these laws that cause so much harm but do nothing to reduce drug use. Let's welcome him.
It's a pleasure to be back. Thanks for having me back. It's a lot warmer, and I appreciate the weather too. Might not be that good for you guys, but I enjoy it. In the 1970s, this movement to end the prohibition of cannabis, of marijuana, was about personal use. It was about the right to be able to enjoy your choice of drug for whatever reason. It's changed a little bit today, just a little bit. Now it's about human rights. It's about civil rights. It's about many things. It's about mass incarceration. It's about crime. It's about murders. It's about funding criminal organizations. It's about so many things. And those people involved in this movement today look a little different. Some of the same folks, but we have some different folks. You know, there's a saying that Ethan Nadelman makes from the Drug Policy Alliance. He says, this movement is about people who like drugs, people who hate drugs, and people who just don't give a damn about drugs. It's about everyone who's concerned about this issue of cannabis prohibition in the United States today. I represent not just one police officer, not just one judge, not just one criminal prosecutor, not just one prison warden, not just one DEA agent or one FBI agent, but I represent thousands of such folks, not just here in the United States, but from around the globe. I represent law enforcement against prohibition. And thank you. Law enforcement against prohibition. Thousands of those folks who have come to realize that these policies like cannabis prohibition are counterproductive to the one thing that we have taken an oath to do, and that was to protect you guys, public safety. These policies that place billions of dollars into the hands of the cartels and criminal organizations and local gangs who wreak havoc in our streets is counterproductive to public safety. Period. As mentioned when my bio was read, unfortunately it was that violence, losing a close friend who was working undercover making a drug buy in Washington, D.C., working with the FBI. And he was murdered by the drug dealer he was making the exchange with. It was that violence that brought me to this place, into re-examining these policies. That happened in 2000. And ever since, I have been educating myself, and I have been on a quest to end these failed policies. You see, despite what we are currently hearing from different departments within our administration about, whoa. We don't use the term war on drugs anymore. It's not a war. Yeah, it is. It's a war against people. It's a war against you. It's a war against you. It's a flat-out war against people. You know, this is clearly the most destructive social policy since slavery. You know, we heard earlier the report that was mentioned, and it's a great report on the collateral cost, examining the disparity issues with these marijuana arrests here in Minnesota. And it's not just Minnesota, it's from my own state, Maryland. You know, it's New York, it's Florida, it's California, it's any state that you visit across this country. We still arrest close to 700,000 people every year for marijuana possession alone in this country. And don't let people tell you that, well, you know, it's only an arrest. No one spends time in prison anymore. Well, let me tell you something. And I know it's the same here. Back home, when you're arrested for marijuana possession, if you don't spend a few hours in the detention center, you're probably spending a day or two. And that's if you can afford an attorney to help get you out or make bail, post bond. And what happens during that time? Do you lose your job? Do you lose your car that was towed? What else do you lose? A lot of money? The list is long. And then what happens? Just the arrest alone. You don't have to be convicted. Just the arrest alone will prevent you from being able to get a job in the future. Housing, school loans, many things. It is devastating, just the arrest alone. It ends up in cyberspace and it never goes away. So be careful what you tweet and whatever you put on Facebook. I learned my lesson. But let's talk a little bit quickly about these consequences of these policies of drug prohibition. Okay, we have murders. We talked a little bit about violence. We have mass incarceration. What about the drug dealers on many of our neighborhood corners? Selling drugs to our children, hiring our children to sell drugs to other children. See, these policies make drugs more available to our kids. Absolutely, legalization will deal with that. We have to accept the fact that drugs like cannabis are here to stay. They've always been here. Always been here. And that being the case, the question is, who do you want managing that business? That business will exist. There's only two possible answers. Do you want responsible people doing it, like yourselves, or do you want criminal organizations and the cartels from Central America? I don't know about you folks, but for me it's pretty much a no-brainer. Regulation and control. Let the people in the communities, in the neighborhoods, the business owners who put that license on their wall and value that license hanging on the wall to manage the business in a responsible manner. $1.3 trillion we spent on the drug war over the past 4 decades, high overdose death rates, and the list goes on and on and on and on. That's what we have to show for these current policies that we have. Not one good scenario do I know of. Prohibitionists always say, well, what about the unintended consequences of legalization? Which are what? Speculation of increased use. As long as it's not kids, I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing. Okay, jury's still out on that. Speculation of more vehicular deaths. Jury's still out on that. The message that we would send to our kids. Yeah, these are all possibilities. And they are all of concern, but do they really measure up to the ones that I mentioned prior to? I think not. Gang-style murders, kids hired by drug dealers to sell to other kids in our schools. And what about our distracted police departments? We have lost our focus in what our job really is. Protecting the people, public safety, focusing on violent crime. We are misguided. From my assessment and from the assessment of other police officers I have spoken to, we currently in law enforcement spend about 70% of our waking time on the job focusing on these drug policies, arresting people for marijuana possession and other drug-related crimes. You know, let me tell you one of the reasons why it's so difficult for many police officers to accept what you're here for today, for this change, for legalization of cannabis. Yes, money is part of it, but there's something even more critical that holds on to them. Identity. Identity. Think about it. Most of the police who are on the job today have been under the policies of prohibition of the past 4 decades. It's what we do. It's what we do day in and day out. We clear corners. We arrest people for drug violations. We stop cars. We stop people. We search cars. We search homes. How can we get into that glove box? How can we get into that trunk? How can we get into your pockets? That's what we do all day long, 24/7. Many of us have gone on to other places. Many of us are on speaking tours around the country from one police department to another talking about how we do drug interdiction. You know, how we go seize 2 tons of cocaine or 1 ton of heroin, how we do that. It's like someone walking up to you, because believe it or not, because of this rhetoric we've been fed over the past few decades, believe it or not, many of us are proud of that work because we thought that it would make a difference, because that's what we were taught. But now, the data is clear. As we've heard, it's counterproductive to the very thing that we wanted to do, but yet, many of us are still holding on to that identity because it's more than half of our life. And now having someone say to you, not only was your career ineffective, but in many cases, you harm people. You harm communities. You did more damage than good. Police officers are coming around, but it takes a continued effort like this, like you speaking to them, like you talking to them. This is the only way it will change. People have to be, I guess this is a proper place for the term, reprogrammed. We do. We have to be reprogrammed. So, let me begin to wrap it up with this. What does happen when we move to a place of legalization, regulation, and control? I know it's still early with Colorado and Washington State, but let's talk a little bit about Colorado here. Okay, obviously we know that the money is coming in. First month, I think it was reported about $15 million in gross sales. But let's talk a little bit about that money. See, it's not just about making money. It's not just about making money. Well, maybe it is. Okay, but no, it's not. That's from my perspective as a police officer, that's $14 million that doesn't go into the hands of organized crime. In 1 month. In 1 month. In 1 month. No neighborhood gangs, okay? No cartels. That's $14 million that goes into the hands of the license owners and the people who are hired by the license owners who pay taxes. What else is happening from my perspective? Those people that you see standing in line day after day after day after day, okay? Seen any kids? Seen any children standing in line to buy pot? No. How about behind the counter selling it? No. What about on the street corners? Who's selling it on the street corners? Kids. There's still some left. But with regulation and control, legalization continuing to spread, we will end that illicit market. We will end that dangerous illicit market. So here's a message I have for our representatives, and such courage from our representative that was up here earlier today speaking. Courage to speak about what is right, not about what is popular within your circle. Here's my message to them. Be a responsible legislative body and move forward on this issue, not backwards. Be compassionate for those who need medical cannabis. Be responsible in making your community safer for all citizens. And be responsible in preserving our rights, the ones that are clearly depicted in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights of this country, of this great country. This is still America.
Can we legalize it? Can we legalize it? Can we legalize it? Can we legalize it? I think Governor Dayton heard us because his office is just down the hall. By the way, I want to remind everybody to come over to the Kelly Inn. It's just over there. If you get one of these packets, there's even a map to bring you half a block away. And you can get lunch over there. We're not going to buy your lunch, but you can get lunch there. So please come, and thank you all for coming.